So hi everybody, I am here with Paul Groves, who was the one who pretty much taught me everything I know about triathlon, or 99% of what I know about triathlon. Paul, you were ITU facilitator at that time in 2013 when we've met with you and John Petridis, right?
Yes, that was one of my many facilitation jobs.
Yeah.
Basically, that was my role was to deliver a training package which had been created by, had been evolved over the years and had been standardized by ITU as it was then. And then for each of the courses I delivered, I would update it based on any rule changes and make sure that as technology advanced, I could introduce more videos or animations to keep people busy and focused, because it was a very intensive course. And sometimes the environments were very good, sometimes they weren't. And I remember that we were in Panevėžys, was it, in Lithuania?
Yes, Panevėžys in Lithuania, yes.
And that was good. It was a good location, and we were very lucky that the input you could give from your experience racing with the other people on the course, we could then transpose that classroom experience onto the field of play for the European Junior Cup that took place. And
Yep.
I remember there was a kids race just beforehand.
Yes, that's correct.
And this you stood there at bike mount, and I remember this little girl came out of the water, and as she grabbed her bike, the chain came off and got stuck between the frame and the chain ring, and she struggled and struggled. And I could hear people saying, don't help her, it's in the rules. And you stood over her, and many people went past her, and right at the point when any advantage she might have had gone,
Yeah.
you leant over her and you just guided her to show her how to put the chain on, and off she went. And I thought, well, that's exactly the way we should be doing it. If you'd jumped in and helped her right at the start, it would have been not the right thing to do. But you guided her, and she got it done. And it was a kids race. There was no points, no prize money involved, but you saved her race, and you probably encouraged her to continue racing. And it was that was the point where we then moved into the junior race itself. And then all of the things we learned in the classroom could be put into practice. And here you are now. You've gone on and kept this on. It's good to see that you're now in such a position that you're actually facilitating courses yourself.
Yeah, this 8 years was a big development road, let's say, for me. I mean, it's still ongoing, and I hope I will continue. But yes, it was level 1 course at that time, and 8 years ago. Now I am on level 2, have actually confirmed for the next 4 years my level 2, have revalidated. I'm going, as you know, to Paralympics. I will be chief recovery there as a technical official. So yes, a lot of things are going on, again, thanks to you and John Petridis. I had really good teachers. And yeah, the example that you provided with this girl, it's a good memory for me, of course. At that time, I wasn't really thinking about, if she has an advantage or no advantage, but somehow naturally just went that way. And for us as a technical officials, and I would like to discuss with you a little bit more about the role of the technical official. Who are these people, and why are they called technical officials? Do we deal with technology? Do we put the chain on the cassette if something goes wrong? But my opinion is the technical official is the person who, first of all, is there to help athletes and to make sure that they all have the same conditions for the race.
Historically, I'll use ETU, European Triathlon, as an example, because European Triathlon is older than World Triathlon, or ITU as it was. In ETU, in European Triathlon, we were called race marshals in the old days. And you had race marshals, so you marshaled the event. And then you had the chief general race marshal. The general race marshal is the equivalent we have now of the technical delegate. And my course was in 1999 in Austria, just at the same time as the European Duathlon Championships in Blumau. And we were then delivered a course in the same way, roughly, that we have these courses delivered now. A presentation of the rules was given and how to deal with certain circumstances. In fact, on that course was Dirk Borchardt, who has also been out to the Olympics. We might hear from him later, I think.
Yeah.
But that was a long, long time ago. So it was classroom based, and it was very intense, and with a variety of speakers who told us how to manage the rules and the athletes. And then we went straight into the practical. So a race marshal, which then became a technical official, the language changed over the years, is basically somebody there who works to the technical delegate. So an event is created by a race director, and on race day, that event is handed to the technical delegate and his team or her team. Building up to the race, the technical delegate will be in contact with the race director on a regular basis, to make sure that the direction that the race director is going with his or her race is going to be safe and fair and workable. For example, how many people, what sort of loading you're going to have on the bike course. If it's an age group race, how are you going to set off potentially 2,000 athletes?
Yes, that's correct.
Over the course of a weekend. So all of the technical sides of things, from the registration to the swim start to the bike course, transition, finish, etc., run, that's all part of the planning process. And so that builds up to the race day or the race weekend, at which point the LOC, the local organizing committee, gives that race to the technical delegate. Then the technical delegate with his or her team will run the race, and the LOC come into a support role. So if something goes wrong with the infrastructure, it will be the LOC who replace it and manage it. But anything to do with the race conditions, that's managed by the technical delegate and his or her team. I'll give you an example. Hamburg, on the women's race, it was Hugh McAtamney who was TD. I was head referee, and the ramp leading out of transition in the square goes up about 5 or 6 steps, and then they rejoin the bike course. Well, we found out later that a motorcycle had stopped on this ramp and accelerated away. And in that moment, it had broken the marine ply, the wood, which was on the ramp. Crazy. It had been in place, exactly the same dimensions had been built year after year, never a problem. But on this event, there was a problem. But because there was a blue carpet on it, nobody could see this. And it was on the second or the third lap for the women. And suddenly I looked over my shoulder. I was at the exit end of transition, and I could see bikes going in the air and wheels and feet and athletes flying everywhere. It was terrible. And what had happened is Cassandra Beaugrand, the French athlete, her front wheel had gone into the hole that she couldn't see. So the bike had stopped,
flipped over,
and other athletes were piling into her. At this point, the LOC wanted to stop the race. But Hugh said no. So we had all of the technical officials we could find, with Hugh at the entrance to T transition, waving a red flag, getting people to slow down. And every technical official was then a step or two closer to the other side to basically channel the cyclists down into a very narrow lane so we could take them up the remaining half of the exit from the square. So we saved that, and the athletes, the female athletes, finished their bike course, admittedly going through a very narrow section. And then between their race and the men's race, they rebuilt the ramp. But in the debrief afterwards, the organizers said we were going to cancel. We were going to abort the race there and then. And Hugh said, well, that's what we're here for. We knew we could manage it. And it was a great example of how the race was made safe for the other athletes. It was made fair because the course was maintained, and so that's basically one of the things, an exceptional role that a technical official might have. But essentially the technical official will have read the competition rules, hopefully and be aware of the competition rules. That's the Bible. You really do need to read that again and again. If it's not in the rules, you can't make it up. So by having a familiarity with the rules, it really does help you. A word of warning, though, the rules have to be, you can either read them in English or the translation has to be accurate. It really does have to be accurate. And if we go back in some time, there was a translation that was done for Latin America, South America, into Spanish. And the whole argument that came up about Alistair carrying Johnny Brownlee over the
Yes.
finish line was, there was a lot of anger because of the bad translation of the rules into Spanish. I gave those rules to a professional translator, and he had the English copy, he had the Spanish language copy. This guy is an expert in his field, and he said, I've never seen a document that was so poorly translated. So you're aware that if English isn't your first language, then you really do have to ensure that the copy of the rules you've got in front of you that have been translated, they must be very well translated. And I think you've had something to do with the translation into Russian, have you?
Yes, but unfortunately it has never materialized. The translation has been done. I have to proofread it, but it's still in the process.
But it is essential, because the confusion that can be created by that is intense, which is why these level 1 facilitation courses, or even the community courses, they are so important, because it will be in English or possibly French or Spanish, whichever language has been allocated. But the basic rules, the rules that we use every day at a race, will be reinforced by examples. Yeah. And the facilitator will give the course delegates an opportunity to see how that rule really comes into a race. It's the basic rules that are important. They really are. If you can get those right, then you'll be a solid part of a technical official team.
Yeah, so it's one thing or the other. You either need to have a very good translation, or you have to have a technical official who can at least understand English. So they can read the rules, understand the rules, which is even more important, and then being able to apply it.
Also, somebody who
discuss for a couple of minutes the requirements for the technical official, because we understand there are people standing in the field of play, giving some instructions to the athletes, or just watching for the infringements that may occur during the race. What are the requirements? I mean, English language, okay, it's one of, let's say, we need to know the rules. The second one, of course, we need to learn to and understand the rules and know how to apply it. Are there any other requirements for those who would like to become a technical official?
As far as I'm aware, there are no age requirements, other than that we would prefer you to be over 18. I think 18 is a bottom level. There's no upper level at all, which okay, we can be as open and inclusive as possible, but we have to realize that there are certain areas where, as a technical official, you're going to be on the field of play in the pouring rain, in the blinding sunshine. I know you're going to Alanya later this year, and I remember the European Championships there. I was on site at 6 o'clock in the morning until 7 o'clock at night for one day. And the only break I had was to get some fluids and to go to the toilet. It was really hard work. And as a volunteer, you've got to be prepared to put up with that. So you have to have a degree of physical fitness which will enable you to last an entire day. You'll be given food, you'll be given water, but it can be quite hard work. If you're going to be working at a winter triathlon, we're going to be working down in temperatures. I remember in Estonia a few years ago, we got up in the morning and it was minus 20, minus 25, minus 26.
27, I think it was. It was actually the day when my daughter was born, and I had to come to the race to Tartu, and you were there. And I managed to avoid this extremely cold, freezing conditions because my daughter was born on that day.
It warmed up. It got quite warm later. It was minus 18 when the race started, or minus 17. So those are the extremes of temperature and climate we have to put up with. You must also be able to really almost have 360-degree sight. You got to be aware of your surroundings. One of the early failings that we try to identify and correct amongst officials is that you've got to be aware of the direction of racing. You've got to look at what's happening. You've got to see what's happening and understand what's happening. So ideally, if you have been a triathlete, or if you are still a triathlete, then you have an understanding of what's happening in front of
Yeah.
you, and that can be translated into the way that you act within the rules, and help the technical delegate and the head referee. It's not to say that if you aren't an athlete, that you shouldn't be a technical official, because there are skill sets outside of the sport that people have that they can bring to it. But if you're able to get a mixture of the two, even better. We have people who work with us who are experts on wheels, for example.
Yeah.
Now, you show me one wheel and another wheel, I can say whether it fits into the basic acceptability range, but whether it's on the UCI list of approved wheels, I couldn't help you. But I know other people who can look at a wheel and say, that's good, that's not good. So that's a skill set that can come there. But you need somebody who can be calm, somebody who can communicate. And the communication is to ask questions, to listen, to watch the body language. You need somebody who can be diplomatic. On occasions, you may have to give a red card to somebody.
Yeah.
You may have to inform somebody there's a penalty, and there's a way of doing it. Many years ago, there was one federation where the problem they found was that the officials they had in the country just wanted to get as many disqualifications as possible. And we managed to move away from that. It was almost as if they had the whistle and they were making a mark on the whistle to show how many times they'd disqualified somebody. Well, that's not what we're here for.
Yeah, that's not for the sport.
No, but also if somebody is to be disqualified, you can't not disqualify them. I'll give Richard Murray as an example, because Richard is probably one of the most high-profile cases. What happened to him in Hamburg when he was disqualified? His reaction was far greater than perhaps it could have been, because he was so angry that, for example, Alistair Brownlee hadn't been penalized in Yokohama either the year before or that year. And I used the video. I take a video clip of that and I used it in the training course. Alistair Brownlee comes out of the swim with Javier Gomez, and he's absolutely focused on getting after Javier to make sure that they're together on the bike. Alistair takes his bike, puts his helmet on, takes his bike. Alistair then runs to the mount line of transition, and in the center of the mount line stops his bike to fasten his helmet.
Yeah.
He wasn't penalized. And Richard Murray he said, why isn't Alistair Brownlee penalized? Why is it me? And I said, well, the reason he wasn't penalized was because I wasn't there. And if I had been there, he would have had the penalty, because it's quite straightforward. Unfortunately, the person who made the decision about Alistair Brownlee at that race said, well, any advantage he had, he lost when he stopped in the middle of the transition area to. Now, okay, you can argue that, but in the eyes of the world, Alistair Brownlee committed an infringement there for which he wasn't penalized. Other athletes would be penalized. So that interpretation was fundamentally wrong. So when Richard was given the disqualification in Hamburg for his unsportsmanlike behavior, he was incredibly angry with, in particular, ITU for really not looking after athletes fairly and equitably. So I explained to him why the process was in place and explained to him how he could appeal if he wanted to. His reaction was that he would never race ITU again, which was a shame, because in my mind, that Hamburg race was the one that Richard Murray should have come into and won. He'd taken the world duathlon title early in that year, having broken his collarbone in a race somewhere. He came into that race quite fresh. And because of the wetsuit problem, putting it in the wrong box, his race just finished. And it really was a great shame. But he came back the next year and shook my hand, and he went across to Jean-Marc, who was the technical official in the penalty box, and found him and shook his hand as well. And I think Richard Murray showed great sportsmanship by coming back to Hamburg and by racing and by taking that penalty. But yeah, so you do need to be diplomatic in dealing with these. You can't wave a red card and smile at someone, because that's not the way it goes. The athlete's made a mistake, and there could be any number of reasons for the athlete making the mistake. All you're doing is taking away the advantage that that athlete has got. You're not making a point. You're not. Education is for the coaches at elite athlete level.
Yes.
So yeah. So diplomacy, that's good. Empathy. There's a whole list of words we use. We invite.
Yeah, normally in the course we put them on the board. What are
right.
characteristics of the technical official? Yes, and we have like 14, 15 words there.
And it's funny. Everybody can identify with them, particularly if you've actually had a penalty yourself. Yes. My very first triathlon, I undid my helmet before I came into transition. I got a 2-minute penalty. That was the British rules in those days. It made no difference to the overall results. I was right down the back, but I noticed that the penalty had been given to me incorrectly because I hadn't been given an opportunity to rectify the problem, which was the rules then. And I thought, well, perhaps we should look at these rules and perhaps we should apply them as they're written. Yeah. Well,
that's true. That's true. Yeah, I mean, in your case, in the story about Richard Murray, he acted as a real gentleman afterwards, and it's very nice when athletes, even if you have a case when you penalize them and they don't agree. I had a similar story when we just recently in Targu Mureș at the Duathlon Championship, when the athlete from British team, she received the penalty. And then she came, of course, to see the technical delegate to discuss what the penalty was for. And I explained her what was her case. She just said, "Thank you. I understand now. And next time I'll try to correct it." It was very nice to see the athletes, but of course they are upset with the race because they didn't take the position they deserve because of the 10-second penalty. But on the other hand, when athlete has a pure ability to understand the rule, you in calm voice can, after the race, can explain what the case was. What infringement was there, why the person was penalized. No, you always avoid any bad feelings afterwards. And after all, we all want to have fun at the race.
That's right. And what I've noticed in recent years, and it's a really positive move from the ITU technical committee as was, there was a time when, we gave you a penalty, we realized it was wrong, so we'll take 15 seconds or 20 seconds or 10. You can't do that. You can't take 10 seconds off an athlete's finish time in an arbitrary fashion like that, because the 10-second penalty isn't just 10 seconds. It's slowing down to the penalty box. It's accelerating away from the penalty box. It's the mix of emotions that are hitting that athlete, knowing they got a penalty. So it became ludicrous to have some races where a bit of time was taken off the finish. So after a while, the technical committee came up with the idea that we can penalize people, and that if they feel that that 10-second penalty or even the disqualification is incorrect, they run to the finish line. They then get an honest finish time, as honest as it can be, because they've still got all the emotions running through their head. But they can then, if they disagree with the decision, appeal the decision. Then they can see the evidence that was used by the officials to communicate to the chief of the section, to communicate to the head referee who makes the decision to penalize or not. They can then see that evidence and it goes to the competition jury. Only last weekend before last, in Balıkesir in Turkey. Very good race, I have to say. I was really impressed with it. In the junior men, the camera angle was looking down this narrow canal, and the athletes were swimming in an anti-clockwise route. So the first swimmer came round the two boys at the end. First swimmer came round the boy. Second swimmer hit the boy in the middle and started to go around the wrong side of it, but then realized he was going to cut the course. He moved backwards and then came around the correct way. In the rules, it states you have to rejoin the course at the point that you left the course.
In order not to be disqualified.
Very specific. And I was commentating on that race, and I said, under race pressure, this athlete, young lad, he had the presence of mind to realize he'd made that mistake, to get back into the right line, and then to swim around it. So that was a really wonderful display of what he'd done. We then found out afterwards, because on the bike, he and the young Hungarian athlete Martin Kropko, it was Sorokin and Kropko. They broke away on the bike. They did a really good chain gang all around the sprint distance. Came into transition, and the head referee had a red card in front of the Russian and blew the whistle, called his name, showed him the red card, and gave him the reason, was cutting the course, but then said, and it was very clear on the video, you may continue the race, which is exactly what we should do. There's no red card, get out. You can't do that. So the head referee there was absolutely perfect in his delivery. It seems that the information he'd got from the swim course was incomplete. And so we're able to, although I'm sitting here in England and he was down there in Turkey, I managed to get them to look at the video that all the spectators had seen. He was able to see then that the athlete had corrected it. So that was something that the athlete, the Russian athlete, must have been so angry. He ran very well.
Because of this anger, maybe.
So, but he finished the race, and he didn't need to appeal because the race referee head referee was there at the finish to explain the circumstances, and he was very happy afterwards. But in the past, that could have been a completely different result, and a result that would have given us a bit of bad press. So this idea that the technical committee is gradually refining the rules where there's a weakness. They've identified the weakness and strengthened it up. It's always going to happen with technology changing and with tactics changing, and that's another reason why, as a technical official, you need to keep reading the competition rules. There's a very good newsletter that is sent out to all technical officials, which contains updates, and they're updates that are coming from the centre, from World Triathlon. And it's those updates that keep everybody really in a position to go to a race, knowing the rules as everybody else does.
And every year rules are updated.
The rule book itself, I'll be critical of it because I worked for over 35 years applying law at my place of work, a number of laws, and these are government laws, so they are particularly well written. And there are many places in our competition rules where, unfortunately, the bits aren't joined up as they should be. It's very difficult. It really is. It's got better over the years, but there are still areas, I feel, where the rules don't join together properly. And there has to be, if you are told in the rules you cannot do something, there has to be a consequence to the cannot do. You can't have, you cannot do that, but then no consequence if you do it. And so, unfortunately, these are the bits where it makes it very difficult for a head referee or a technical delegate, or indeed a facilitator, to communicate how we run the rules. And I guarantee at every course you deliver, there'll be somebody on there who will ask the question about one particular rule that doesn't work.
Oh yes, that's true. It's true. You actually gave me a very nice example of how the rules can or cannot be applied. Speaking about this barefoot athlete that wanted to ride the bicycle without shoes on, and it's not written in the rule book anywhere.
No, there's no rule at all. It was a question for a domestic race about an athlete who wanted to ride the bike not wearing shoes. Well, there's no rule. If it's a domestic race, you can do what you want, really. But if you want to apply a standard, then the standard is the World Triathlon competition rules. You don't need to go away from that. That's an easy set of rules to work with. And there's no rule that says you can't. So if there's no rule that says you can't then create a rule. Look at the, in the past, we used to disqualify people for not wearing running shoes. Remember that?
Yes, yes. And the rules now say you can run barefoot.
Exactly. In 2014, in the end of the year, there was a discussion between ITU, as it was then, and the IAAF to ask whether or not this is a rule they should continue with. And it was agreed that there's no real physical advantage to not wearing shoes. And so in Geneva at the European Championships, we had the mixed relay. I was commentating there with a French guy who's absolutely, he's like a walking encyclopedia. Eric Catio, lovely guy. And we saw on our monitor it was France, Switzerland, Great Britain were leading the final leg of the mixed relay. And David Aus from France came into transition and just went. I think Dora Rosa was standing near his position, and you saw her head go like that. She couldn't believe how fast he'd moved.
Yeah.
And we both commented that this was the fastest transition we'd ever seen on bike to run. But then the cameras picked up that David House had no shoes on.
Mm-hmm.
And it was a 1.5K run, 1.6K run along the road, through a park, twist, turn, and then back. And the British athlete had then disappeared off. The Swiss athlete was looking, you could see him looking ahead as David House pulled away. And he couldn't understand what was happening. But we heard people shouting out, he's got to be disqualified. He's disqualified. He's not wearing shoes. Luckily, I'd read the rules and I knew what was going on. They explained that this was the case. I dare say his shoe sponsors were quite upset, but he went on to win that race, no penalty, and he took the title for the French. So this is the way that rules evolve. If there's no reason to have the rule there, then gradually World Triathlon is moving them out of the way and replacing them with a bit of common sense. We had the whole thing about disc brakes as well. That was a long discussion. Many years ago, there was the idea in winter triathlon that you had to have different shoes for each segment, for the run, mountain bike and ski. And this was largely because certain nations had on the market some bike ski shoes. They could be used for both elements, but they cost 200-300 euro. And the smaller nations, the less developed sporting nations, they couldn't afford them. So they were being pushed out of the racing. So these things change, evolve.
Yes, let's say evolved. Yes, because we are a living organism, and the group of technical officials that ITU has, it's evolving. People come, people leave. The rules change. The athletes change as well.
Oh, they do, and the understanding of athletes and
everything moves.
Yeah, the use of technology now is far, far greater. The other thing that the technical official needs to remember is that we're not the only ones with a camera. The amount of times you see the spectators filming what's going on, you're not only there to enforce the rules and make sure that it's safe and fair for the athletes, but you're also representing either European Triathlon or World Triathlon or whichever confederation you work for, because you're wearing that uniform and you are expected to behave in a way that promotes that. Not a cigarette on the side is not going to happen. We don't want to see that anywhere. We don't want to see technical officials in the VIP tent. Or sitting on the side of the road in groups drinking. That's not the way it is. You're there as an ambassador for the sport, and also by implication on your own nation. And it's the good thing about technical officials is that mix of nationalities, and it's always really exciting to go to an event and to meet up with old friends and to make new ones, and to try languages out. And there's that moment at the end of the day, at the end of the race, when you all get together in the finish line, under the finish arch, and that's your team photo. And it's a good reward for people who work so hard and for people who are volunteers.
Yeah, I think the biggest reward in triathlon for technical officials is not money. We don't get money. We are even called self-funded technical officials.
Yeah.
It's only technical delegates that are covered part of the expenses by the race organizers. But it's people we meet, people we work with from all the different countries with different culture, with different knowledge, with different understanding of the game. And that variety, I think, is the biggest or ability and opportunity to exchange the ideas, exchange the experiences is something that really is the biggest reward in triathlon for technical officials.
Also, if you are in my position, I was a facilitator. I don't do it anymore, but I handed that knowledge to you, and
Yeah.
it's wonderful to see that you've taken that and you've improved it. If it was a question of me giving you knowledge and expecting that to stay in that confined set of parameters, then nothing would improve. But you've seen areas that I trained you where you can improve on that delivery. So you're improving it all the way along. It's essential that we improve as we go along, rather than keeping knowledge to ourselves. The people who share knowledge, it's a far better thing for the sport. Those who hold on to it and don't share it, it doesn't work. So it's great to see this evolution again.
Yes, I agree with you. As I'm also as a facilitator now, just like you were before. And for me, it's very sad to see that, you always have group of 15, 16, 18 people in your classroom that you trying to share the knowledge, the values of the World Triathlon with. And then at some point you understand that out of this group, only maybe 10 continue and evolve. And the rest, they go down, they stayed in their own country, they don't go anywhere outside. Maybe they have no financial opportunity, let's say, they can't afford traveling worldwide. But I think if you really want to, you can arrange everything. But it's just a position of some people. Back in my home country in Lithuania, I see from some Russian technical officials, I saw it in Romania, I saw it in many other countries, in US, that technical officials, they just stay in kind of like their own sandbox. They don't want to go outside. And I think it's a pity, and they just limit themselves, in my opinion. Because,
well, I think one of the things that we were pushing was that sometimes you would hear from people, I want to be at the next WTS event.
Yeah.
Well, how about doing a few small events first? When you go to a smaller event, you end up doing many more jobs, and you increase your knowledge of working at swims, perhaps registration and finish, or swim start and run course. You get a variety of tasks. If you go to a WTS event, you'll do one task if you're lucky, and that will be there, and you won't see much of the rest of the race. Also, we were pushing that if anybody can, to get to the off-road events, because then the dynamics of creating a course are far more different and much more interesting.
Yes.
And also to Winter Triathlon, because there again, you've got an entirely different dynamic. You've got conditions that can change within the race. You can have a snowstorm come through the race and be obliged to shorten the bike course as the race is running. I've done that before in Norway. And you have entirely different conditions. The athletes, it's a wonderful mix of skill sets that they have. Some of them you'll see them racing in the off-road cross duathlon, cross triathlon events, but you might not see them racing on the big international European or World Cup circuits. So you're getting to see different people. But again, it's the competition rules that you're applying. So it's a common set of rules that move from each discipline, but to a different environment. So I would always recommend to an official that if you want to set your sights, I want to be in Paris for 2024 or wherever else, then fine, have that as an ambition. But let's face reality, you're going to enjoy yourself much more by going to the small events and to see how an event can grow. For example, going to a very small event and watching it grow into a big event. That's something as a technical delegate it really feels good. I'll give Targomuresh as an example. We went there, we went to see the Balkan Cross Duathlon Championships. And I was really impressed with it. We changed some things around for the next year, and it then became the European Cross Duathlon Championships and was very successful, very challenging. And then it grew into the Cross Duathlon, Cross Triathlon Championships. Then it became, in 2019, the Multisport Festival. And it was the biggest European event we'd ever seen. I think there was about, over the entire time, there was something like nearly 2,500 athletes racing at the various levels. The city had never seen anything like it before. But that was an event that grew and grew. And it grew naturally. It didn't go from a small event to a big event. I'm always a bit cautious when you go to an event that's suddenly become a World Cup, or suddenly become a European Championships when it hasn't really had that growth behind it, because it's those little stages where the technical officials will feed their experience to the technical delegate. The technical delegate's report, which is huge, is then looked at by the organizers, by ITU or World Triathlon, and by other committees to see where the strengths and weaknesses are. So the event is a growing event, and anything that goes wrong at this level should be gone by the time it gets to this level. So progression, it's also legacy, isn't it? If you have an event that comes each year to a place, then the city authorities, the sponsors, the police, everything, they begin to understand that this is happening once more, and the local schools can get involved in the side events, and then you have that legacy rather than just parachuting in, dropping an event there and then going. Where's the legacy there? There's nothing.
Yes. Yeah, and we always strive for the event to improve as well. Not only us as technical officials, but also for the LOC, for the organizing committee. You remember a few years ago, my frustration with one of the events that was a European Cup, Junior European Cup for 6 years at that time. When I was a technical delegate, it was the 6th year. And for all the years, it has never changed. Just because all the technical delegates before me, they wrote very nice report saying, yeah, everything's fine, everything is good, but nothing to improve. And I mean, I don't believe it could be this way. Even the Olympics in Tokyo just showed that there are issues that you can improve and you have to improve, you know.
Exactly.
And I'm not talking about the small events like continental cups or even local events. There is always something we can improve. And for us, it's also important. Yes, consistency is very important. I like to use this word because rules have to be applied similar way. So we avoid the situation like with Alistair Brownlee and Richard Murray. But also it has to be when we grow from just regular basic technical official to the technical delegate, our responsibility grows. And in this role, we definitely have to be in the position when we help LOC also to improve event for the next year and not wait to develop the sport.
Yeah, that's where the event organizer's manual comes in. Now that's a huge piece of work, which again has evolved and grown over the years. And it's basically a construction manual for an event. And I've heard organizers say, well, I can't afford to have something like that. We know you don't need to have that. You're not delivering the Olympics. You're delivering a European Cup race, or you're delivering a Continental Cup race. So whilst that is the ideal, if you can do something like that, then that's perfect. It's a guide, and it's also it saves an organizer so much time. If they're struggling to work out how to do something, well, go and have a look in that manual. It will probably tell you how to do it. It will probably tell you how many barriers you need. It will probably tell you what size your transition area needs to be. Well, not probably, it will. It will show you the dimensions. And those dimensions are there not because we want everything to look like the Olympics. It's because it makes it fair and safe. Those are the two fundamental words that we have to focus on: fairness and safety.
Yes.
The thing, I know the event you're talking about, that in areas simply wasn't safe, and it certainly wasn't fair. And it wasn't fair on you coming in there after all the previous technical delegates who had written a report that completely ignored the problems. Okay, it's a nice trip out there. Your accommodation's paid and your travel might be paid, but it's not just a holiday. And I get the impression that the other people had not done their job properly. And if they had raised those points earlier, identified the areas of weaknesses, then the race organizer could very well have addressed those problems and improved the quality of the event. And so when you came in, you would have had a far better event to manage. There have been improvements since then, I know. I've watched it very closely because I redesigned with you, we redesigned the flow for the finish. And I believe that's now been implemented, but it wasn't rocket science. It really wasn't. how these things happen, I don't know, but it was a shame it did have to happen.
Yes, because you actually helped me there with the award ceremony and everything, because even that was, it looks like, it's a simple thing, and that's something that athletes don't think about, or general public doesn't know, that our role as a technical official is actually more like, I can compare to the experience flying the airplane. No, the LOC is actually an operator, the airline. What starts with the travel when you fly the plane is when you arrive to the airport, and there's people at the check-in counter. Those are the technical officials. And it doesn't end when you just disembark the aircraft. It actually ends when you pick up your baggage and you leave through the customs. And this is where the technical officials are still there, because
Yes.
what we do, we greet and meet you at the registration, and then at the end we say goodbye and wave our hand after the award ceremony. So the technical officials are not only the ones that are on the field of play looking for infringements, but they are all the way to the time when you receive your medal, your award, and then you go home.
Yeah. It's a long day. It's very satisfying when it goes right. It's frustrating when it goes wrong.
Yes.
I can imagine there was a lot of frustration at certain things that went on in Tokyo, but hopefully the things that went wrong in Tokyo will be looked at and they won't go wrong again in future. I did notice, this is something that perhaps is open for discussion. When you look at the elite women's race, you saw that a number of the athletes were lapped. Now, we have a reason for that. If the leading athletes are really going fast and the slower athletes are dropping back, then those lead athletes it presents a risk to them to join up with the back of the pack. So we take those athletes off the course. Personally, I don't think it was a very good image to see at the Olympics and the elite women's race so many not being able to finish because they were caught.
Yes.
Why did that happen? Well, with Flora Duffy at the front with Jess Learmonth, you got two immensely powerful cyclists, but it's not the first time they've raced. And so I would ask, if it's not the first time they've raced and we knew that that was potentially going to happen, why did we have an 8-lap course? Why didn't we have a 6-lap course? Was it that the Olympics insisted on having that, or was it an oversight? That's something for discussion at a far higher level.
Yes.
But imagine the damage to the sport in terms of sponsors there, when they look at the elite women's race and say, well, half of them didn't finish.
Yeah, when they have to withdraw from the race first lap into the bike course, yeah, it's a problem.
Yeah. That wasn't good, and it must be disappointing if you've spent all the years, particularly after last year, and all your hopes are of getting to the Olympics and to get across the finish line, and some of them were self-funded. To see that happen, it must have been absolutely soul-destroying for those athletes. Hopefully, that will be something that will be avoided in future. I know in some of our smaller races, we still have that, and we have it for a safety reason. I remember once in Penza, we had a visiting athlete from Armenia, not a very strong swimmer, but a good biker and runner. And his circumstances were that he was going to be on the run course on the bike course, which is going to be part of the run course. He would be doing his final lap when the runners started. But in order to allow him to continue, and with the agreement of all of the coaches there and the athletes, and we announced it at the race briefing, he would have a motorcycle in front of him and a motorcycle behind him with technical officials there, to create a safety area for him. And he would then go onto the course and the runners could see him.
Yes.
Well, that's exactly what happened. And it was managed really well. The technical officials there in Russia, they did an extremely good job. The LOC provided an extra couple of motorcycles only for that task. It was really, really well managed. But it gave that athlete from Armenia the chance to finish the race. And in terms of development, with ETU giving development money to Armenia, we actually had an Armenian result rather than a lap, DNF not finished and no result. So I think you have the opportunity to adapt the rules and to create an opportunity at that level, but you certainly don't have that at a World Cup or at the Olympics. But it's
Yeah, I
something
agree with
that,
you in this regard, especially considering I speak to the athletes just like you did before, and some of the athletes are really good friends of mine, and you know, I asked them how much did it cost for them to prepare for the Olympics, you know, and for some of them it reaches up to $1 million US
oh,
to get ready, because you have to do the training camps, the coaches, the masseuse, I mean, everything, nutrition. If you accumulate all the entire amount, you know, of everything you've spent your money on that is related to your Olympic result, to your race, you know, it's up to $1 million. And then you think, okay, that athlete came to the Olympic Games, not necessarily Tokyo. I think the same was in Rio, the same was in Sydney, in London. You put a lot of investment, and then you come into the race, and then you are lapped in such a level event. I mean, I understand for us as for technical officials, it's easier when the athlete is lapped. We don't have to watch, you know, for the drafting violation on the bike, because if you're lapped, you're not allowed to follow the leading pack. So it makes our life as technical officials easier. But I agree with you in this regard. I mean, it's not up to me to decide. Of course, there is an executive committee that makes the decisions. But yeah, it would be probably much better for the sport if the athletes at such a level events, they're all very competitive. Of course, none of them as fast in the swim, let's say, as the others, but still being lapped on the first or second lap of the bike course. I think it's something that we, together with the race organizers, with the Olympic Committee, with the host country, should really think about and maybe change the rules so that we don't have lapped athletes. Because considering the amount of money they've put in, not
or just redesign the course. If the bike laps are longer, then you're reducing the longer the bike lap is, the more you reduce that risk. And I think 8 laps at 5K is probably a little bit too short, especially as it was 8 laps of very flat riding. But then I didn't design the course, and it wasn't my call. It was a far higher authority. I just hope that we can learn from what happened in Tokyo. But I suppose the next focus, of course, is going to be that big one in Hawaii, isn't it? With Blumenfeld taking a wild card, and Flora Duffy being offered the wild card. I'm sure that as a result of the performances we've seen in Tokyo, if both of them are to race at Hawaii, the viewing figures are going to go through the roof.
Yeah, it would be very interesting to see that race. It would be really, really very interesting to see.
So
I remember the same was with Jan Frodeno. Then Jan Frodeno has received his Olympic title, and then he was racing in Ironman, and everybody was just following him.
Yes, because it's the way that if there's somebody who's a character or a figurehead, so shall we say, then it does bring people to the sport. I don't have a TV license in the UK. You need a TV license to watch BBC or live television. I don't have a TV license because half of the stuff on television is rubbish as far as I'm concerned. But we followed the races using Twitter and also the live timing. The live timing from the Olympics was fantastic. It really was. But the Twitter news feed, the amount of people who'd never seen a triathlon before who were watching the men's and the women's race, I was really quite surprised. And they were so thrilled about what was going on. So clearly, the sport we both love is something that is very attractive to the outside audience.
Yes.
I think when the individual races had finished, then the talk started about the mixed relays, and you've seen these right at the very heart of the race, haven't you? And the atmosphere there, the intensity, it's absolutely incredible. And the beauty of it all is that we were the first sport to mix the genders in this mixed relay idea. And we've always prided ourselves as a sport that we have equal prize money for. And it's something that's so important throughout the race, throughout the sport. And to see that we've now set an example, and other sports have begun to follow it. The intensity of the athletes, it seems they always want to race a little bit harder in the relays than they do as an individual. But as a technical official working at the relays, it's even
It's a
it's
nightmare. It's a nightmare.
it's so fast, everything.
Yes, yes. It is extremely fast, and then again you have to watch for this exchange area as well. You have added, facility, so the course becomes longer for the technical official, the harder. But,
But
I
it's
mean,
nice to see as
it's
well
very
that
dynamic.
yeah, and the way that the handover zone has been gradually changed so that we can reduce the risk of an error.
Yes.
We've made it over the years. We, as technical officials and technical delegates, we've worked together with the organizers and the athletes to make this handover as easy as possible. So what we've also done as technical officials, feeding up the chain, is to make a race more difficult for an athlete to get an infringement. For example, in transition, you have the mount line. It's huge, it's green, it's big, and it's there. And it's the same for the dismount line. It's huge, it's red, it's big. So we've identified this is where you get off, this is where you get on. Sorry, things like that. And then the transition area, we make it bigger for athletes so that there's less congestion, there's more of an opportunity for them to get things right. This DVD I showed you a bit earlier from 2005, there's some footage in there, which is the promotional video from ITU. Honestly, there's some scenes there. Athletes come into transition, they've got the bike helmet undone, throwing the helmet over the rack, no boxes, not untidy, a complete mess. And we realized that we need to help athletes. So we have a box now for the athlete with their number and their name and their country, and it's in their designated area. So we reduce the chances of them getting it wrong.
Yes.
And it also makes it look a lot more professional. And the races I saw on that video from all those years ago, they don't look very professional. And then you look at what we see now, and the whole presentation of the sport, it really is quite the most exciting thing on television, I think. When you look at the three disciplines, swim, bike, run, it's something that can be related to by everybody, and so many things can go wrong, which makes it more televisual. The person in the lead could get something wrong on transition. Anything could go wrong, and it's the elements of uncertainty that make it draws the audience into the viewing.
Yeah, that's true. It's true. It becomes more and more visual, let's say.
Yeah.
And I mean, I understand why the course sometimes, why organizers are trying to make the course shorter with more laps, because it's, let's say, more spectator friendly or TV friendly. But first of all, we have to, I believe, we have to keep in mind the athletes, how it is for them. And if, of course, we want to make it friendlier to everyone, then we should not forget about the athlete. So if we make more laps, but the shorter laps, then we probably have to drop off the lap athlete rule. If we have longer laps, then yes, we can again reapply the lap rule and have it this way.
With the longer laps, all you need to do is to use a course that has a bit more to look at than a flat road with a robot at one end. I mean, it wasn't a very exciting course. And you've been on other courses where the bike course has been absolutely breathtaking, but still, you can have 6 laps, but if they're interesting, you do that. In Baku, I can't remember. I didn't see much of the bike course there. Yeah, the bike course wasn't entirely flat, was it?
It had a few hills there. No, but nothing very, very hard. It was still very fast because last 2 athletes were actually from Latvia and Lithuania. Kopustas was the Lithuanian athlete, last out of the water, with Latvian athlete just exiting before him. But Latvian athlete was much stronger on the bike, so he managed to go another 3 or 4 laps before he was caught. And unfortunately, Tautvydas Kopustas was caught like on the second lap. As soon as he left the transition, the big pack came in, and he was caught.
If we design this is again the LOC and the TD. If they sit down and they look at the course, as a technical delegate, if the event is going to be a new race, then you will go down to the venue and walk the course or cycle the course with the organizers, and you'll see where you can perhaps guide the organizers into making an adjustment to the course. I know the event, one of the best events I think on the World Cup circuit was that race in Arzachena in northern Sardinia. The hill on that, it's a sprint distance race, but the hill there is just incredible. When you stand in the transition area and look up, the very, very big hills there, and you can pick out the athletes as they're cresting the hill to come down the other side. And spoke to many of them, and they said, well, it's been wonderful to have a really challenging bike course rather than the flat ones we see. A flat course has its own merits because it's fast and it's exciting, and so long as there are some technical features in it, it can still be a challenge. But having that mixture of courses really makes the world a better place.
Yes, and I can just mirror what you say by adding the same thing happened in Târgu Mureș in this duathlon championship a few months ago. Then athletes, they said they knew, because the course was different from the one you remember. This time it was through the city, so you had climbs, you had sharp turns, so it became much more technical, much more interesting for the athletes. And the overall commentary from all the athletes was it was extremely nice, beautiful bike course. If it only would be dry, because we had a lot of crashes because of the rain and some slippery areas. But in general, if it would be dry course, it would be extremely fast, extremely technical, and very nice and interesting for the athletes course. And they all said, next year we will come, we just hope there is no rain.
Yeah, it's having a city center course like that, seeing the elite racing, it's very intense and exciting. What I found really nice was the fact that when the age groups raced, you could look at the peloton and they could have been elite athletes, because at the front end of the race, there's some incredibly strong athletes.
Yes.
And they were working, you could hear them shouting to each other in various languages. And there was the movement within the peloton to pull them away from the chase group. And it was great to see age groupers racing on a draft legal event in that way. And again, that's the way that the sport has evolved over the years. Some of the historical sites will look at, the last World Championships. I think it was Spencer Smith won before they became draft legal. And that's why we lost a number of people from the sport, because it went into drafting. But I think it was going to happen anyway. And I'm sure that in the next few years, we're going to see the standard distance race being draft legal for age groupers as well, because it's impossible to really effectively manage drafting with the numbers of people we have competing.
Yeah, and on a small course, it's really hard.
Yeah. I just hope that they never decide to go that way with long distance events, because that would just
I hope
make it pointless, wouldn't it?
Yeah, Ironman has to be non-drafting race. It has to be this way. It has its legacy, and I think it should be like that.
Exactly. Yeah.
All right. We've spent a lot of time talking, and I plan to have like 5-6 minutes with you, but I know you have 35 years experience in triathlon. I have slightly less than 10 at the moment. We can speak probably all day, all night about triathlon and our experiences.
Before we do,
yeah, sure.
I'd just like to wish you a very, very great journey out to Tokyo. It must be quite excited by it all, and to be working with the para athletes. That I think is one of the best rewards of our sport. It really, I love working with them, and there is an official permit when you go out to any para event. You are permitted to have a tear or two in the eyes, because it will happen.
Yes. Yeah, when you see para athletes racing, it's you understand that saying I cannot just does not exist. Because when you are able-bodied man or a woman, there is nothing that can limit you, really. And to understand that, if you don't believe it, you really have to go and see the para event. That's something that is just incredible about what the humans are able to do. But to summarize what we've discussed, can I ask you to give a few advices, few tips to first to the athletes, how to deal with it's about how to deal with technical officials. So one for the athletes, irrespective of you are elite athlete or age group athlete. Second for the coaches. And the third one is if you are thinking about becoming a technical official. So what would be your advice?
Okay. For the athletes, please remember that the person in the uniform that says Europe Triathlon or World Triathlon is a volunteer. They're not being paid. They're there to make sure that your race is fair and safe. They're there to make sure that if you take an illegal advantage, that they will do their best to remove that illegal advantage, in the same way that if someone else you're racing against takes an illegal advantage, that official is there to try and adjust it so that that advantage is taken away. And so it doesn't happen very often, but we do occasionally see elite athletes treating officials as if they are very, very low-class citizens. And it really is not very nice. The most of the athletes we come across will smile and say hello. Some of them are absolutely focused, and we respect that. So for the athletes, we're there to try and make your race a safe and a fair one. Coaches, you need to go and read the rule book. A lot of coaches aren't really aware of all of the rules. Some of them are really, really good, but the ones who come and complain quite often haven't read the rule book properly. And it's a very, very small bit they've missed. I can understand why a coach would be absolutely, really wound up and intense because it's their athlete. And it could be that there's a medal there that they're not going to get. But coaches, you need to go and look at those rules properly. And also talk to us. If there's something that you don't feel is right, please come and talk to us, because we may have missed it. We may not be able to see what's happening. And coaches, you're our eyes and ears out on the course. You're seeing things that perhaps we can't see because we don't have a person there. So there's a lot of interaction we can have with the coaches, but by all means, come and talk to us. And if you don't have the rules, I'm happy to show them to you.
Of course.
If you want to become a technical official, great, read the rules. And also go to the World Triathlon page or the Europe Triathlon page and click on some of the videos there and watch some of the races. If you can watch the highlights, that's one thing. But if you can watch the whole race, do so, because you'll see more of what goes on, and you'll have perhaps a better understanding. If all you've done so far is race, then have a look at the video. You'll see an awful lot more. I know one of the suggestions we made for lockdown was that the technical officials who are going through the revalidation process or who want to move up a level, to look at the archive. There's hundreds of films there. To look at those and try and spot where there's an infringement and identify that infringement and see if that infringement was dealt with correctly using your rules. Obviously, be aware that some of the very old films, the rules had changed. But if you have your rule book there, Appendix K is the rules and penalties and infringements.
Penalties and infringements, yeah.
But look at the race and see where something went wrong. See if an athlete was, in your view, correctly or incorrectly penalized. I think we can all agree what happened in Leeds. The penalty was deserved. Alistair Brownlee deserved that disqualification. Why he did it, I don't know, but there was no question of a disqualification there. But some other decisions, you think, well, was that the right way to deal with the situation? The rules are there. Have a look at that. So that's for technical officials, and also to listen to people like Sasha, because he's the new generation. He'll be telling you how to do things properly.
Thank you, Paul. Thank you very much for your time. Thanks to all viewers who has watched this discussion all the way to the end. I will stop the recording now.